Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. So in today's video we're going to be doing a giant tier list to kind of close off 9th edition, because 10th edition is just around the corner, isn't it really? And we're going to go back and kind of see where these units fit into tiers throughout the entirety of 9th edition in fact. So it's a big video, I don't know how long this is going to be. There will be some timestamps in the actual time down below, so if you want to get to just a certain unit you can do that as well, not a problem. There may also be some duplicate entries, for example Necron Warriors, I believe they're in there with the Gauss Flayers as well as the Gauss Reapers. So there will be some duplicates in this video. Also guys, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, then I would do so now, because once 10th edition does hit, we're going to be going in hard and heavy. We're going to be going through the data sheets, we're going to be going through the tactics, and we're going to be bringing back Know Your Foe in fact as well, for other factions and how to defeat them with Necrons. So yeah, let's get into this tier list. Right, so on the screen here you can see there are 5 tiers, going from S all the way down to D. S tier being the best tier, A being pretty good, B being kind of standard, C below par, and D is just, well, it's a bit crap. So that's where we're going to be putting them in the tier list today. Now the actual order of all the units is, I think it's jumbled. I've got this from tiermaker.com. I believe this is a jumbled, yep, because the Annihilation Barge is first, so this is a jumbled order, but that kind of makes it more interesting for us. Right, in fact, one more thing before we get into this. At some points of the video, one of the units may be in, say, tier list B, and by the end of it, it may have moved to tier list C or even D, or even gone up to S, so it will get changed throughout the video. So maybe you'll also want to check the final results as well before clicking off, but just in case you are using that timestamp at the bottom, always double check with the end of the video as well. Right, so let's kick this off with the Annihilation Barge. This is a heavy support for the Necrons. There's lots of other heavy support options that are better, although heavy support in 9th edition kind of sucked for us. I'm not going to go through those units at this moment because we're going to get to those when we talk about those specific units. But the Annihilation Barge, Tesla weapons, I mean I don't mind Tesla weapons, they're pretty good, but it just didn't feel like a heavy support option. Now it did get better when it got the core keyword, and it got even better because it could do the Ancient Machinery secondary objective, which was to do the action. So that gave it a little bit of use, and of course as well with objectives secured, that also made it semi-useful. But for me, for this moment in time, I'm going to whack it down here, I'm going to put it in the C tier. This may all change. Okay, next on the list I'm going to go with these Canoptek Acrinthrites. I've actually used them a fair bit, to be honest with you. I know I don't actually own them, but I've been proxying them. They've effectively got a melter and a power sword, but they're Necron versions of the melters and power swords. No invuln save unfortunately, but they are one of our fast attack options. Now they've done me pretty well, they've served me okay. So for now, with the Canoptek Acrinthrites, I'm going to put them in B. They're definitely better than the Annihilation Barge. They're not quite A tier, and they're definitely not S tier, and I don't believe they're D tier either. Again, this may change. Right, on to the third one of the day we've got with Anrkayr The Traveller. Now even though Anrkayr is one of the named characters, and most of the named characters in our codex kind of stink, you can't put the relics on them, you can't select their warlord trait, you can't optimize their war gear. But Anrkayr The Traveller actually has some pretty decent war gear. He was naturally strength 6, not strength 5, so his war scythe was naturally strength 8, which was really good against toughness 4. His abilities are pretty good, he's still got My Will Be Done as well on top of that. I thought he was quite a usable character, especially if you're playing the Novuk Dynasty, or dynasties that like to play the melee way. So Anrkayr The Traveller, I'm going to be sticking him in A tier for now. Not S tier, but A tier. Right, onto one of the pylons next. I believe this is the Gauss Pylon. I'm just going to put it straight in D. In the D tier, not D. It's not for me. I mean, I'm going to have to remind myself of it because, like I said, I rarely use it. 450 points. Okay, toughness 8, 30 wounds, 3+ armor save. Weapons are fairly decent, but it's got no movement, it's not fighting, it's got no attacks. It gives out that 5+ invulnerable saves, but yeah, for me, you're not really taking it, not competitively anyway. Right, the Catacomb Command Barge, one of my favourite HQs, very reliable, very resourceful, great buffing character, but can also hold its own in combat or even shooting too. Is it better than Anrkayr The Traveller? I'd say it was, you know, I think it is. They're not far apart, but I know you got to spend a little bit more points for the Command Barge, but it has a little bit more flexibility, the movement, the quantum shielding on top of that. You've got 9 wounds as well. So I'm going to stick the Command Barge just in front of Anrkayr The Traveller. Next we come on to the Chronomancer. And for me there's only one place to put the Chronomancer, and that is right up into S tier. This goes in almost all of my lists, not every list, but almost all of my list. It's always a consideration for a list. Given that invulnerable save as well as a rerollable charge to a standard unit, I think that's really powerful. You're getting 2 abilities for the price of 1 there. And even with its Entropic Lance, which is, I think it's D3 plus 3 damage as well, I think that's not a bad weapon for a HQ. So yeah, it goes in most lists. I know a lot of players love the Chronomancer. S tier without a doubt. Okay, the next one is interesting. It is the Fortification, the Convergence of Dominion. Now, throughout most of the edition, I didn't touch these pillars at all. They weren't a consideration. The ability kind of doesn't work, especially when we got the army-wide command protocols, whereas before, at the very start of the edition, it was a little bit more useful because we didn't have army-wide command protocols. You had to be within, I think it was 6 inches of a character, which really stank. I mean, you had plenty of characters in 2k games, but in 1k games, you didn't have that many characters, so you effectively didn't have command protocols active, and you're not going to spend 80 points to activate it for, you may as well just take another Chronomancer or something. So at the start of the edition, they stank. Now towards the end of the edition with Arks of Omen, I thought they were pretty good because strategic reserves became free for everybody to use, and these basically became an anti-deep strike, anti-strategic reserves if you like. That 9-inch buffer, keeping enemy units away when they come in from reinforcements, was pretty good. And then you get to use them with the Technomancers or the Chronomancers or any of the other Cryptechs in fact, using them for behind enemy lines. Now that part I don't believe was new, but once the strategic reserves was free, it kind of opened my eyes to the potential of them. Now don't get me wrong, competitively, if you take them to tournaments, they may not always do that great against certain factions, so I'm not going to say they're S tier, they're definitely not S tier. But I'm going to stick them in A tier. I'm just going to stick them behind Anrkayr The Traveller for now. And the reason being is that anti-deep strike I think is huge. If you've got 80 points, that's all you're spending is 80 points. You've got 3 separated pillars because they can separate on deployment. Each one of them is going to have that 9-inch buffer as I mentioned. Yes, you could do that with Canoptek Scarabs. You can get 2 units of 3. That would be 90 points. So already that's more points and you've only covered 2 areas, not 3. And also these are toughness 8 with 10 wounds each. Yes, they don't do much. I mean, they do have ranged weapons, but I think they're not quite an auto-include, but not far off it. Okay, on to the Doomsday Ark next. Unfortunately, this weapon has suffered in this entire edition. It effectively feels like an 8.5 Codex datasheet, if you like. D6 amount of shots, D6 amount of damage. The blast keyword, I think, really sucks because you can't fire blast into combat. Even if it is a monster or a vehicle, you can't fire blast into combat. So once it's tagged, you're not firing at all. You can't fall back and fire unless you've got certain protocols or a Royal Warden perhaps to do that. I mean, it has got a fair amount of wounds and it has got the quantum shielding. But yeah, that blast keyword just really kills it. And blast is supposed to be really useful against hordes. But this thing is an anti-tank. The weapon itself is anti-tank, so it's not really firing against hordes. It was going to be fired against the bigger and badder stuff. So for me, I'm throwing it in D. Of course, I'm not putting it behind the pylon. Right, onto the monolith. This one took a bit of a roller coaster ride during 9th edition. Started off pretty badly. You had to pay command points to use them, using the super heavy or super auxiliary detachments. That cost you CP. They didn't get the dynasty buffs at the start of the edition either because they were in those auxiliary detachments. And Necron players were almost forced to abandon this sort of horde mentality of bringing lots of Necron warriors with the monoliths and the ghost arcs. So we had to kind of go towards taking minimum units of Scarabs and Immortals, Tomb Blades with objectives secured because that was the only way we could win by scoring points, which meant the monolith didn't work as well. But in the later part of the edition, they were put into this Arks of Omen detachment, so they gained all the dynasty buffs. A monolith with objectives secured, pretty good. A monolith with the Zerican dynasty keyword, pretty good. And strategic reserves itself became free on top of that. So if you're putting loads of units in reserves and you can keep popping them out with the monolith and moving them around the battlefield, I think it became much better as the edition went, and also the points decreased on top of that. So with the monolith, I think I'm going to go with B. I'm going to stick it in front of the Acrinthrites for now. Right, death marks next. These are kind of like Marmites. Some people love them, some people hate them. I know Idic Beer, 40k, Necrons and more, he doesn't really like death marks that much. I quite like them. I'm more of a shooty player. but I do understand why people dislike them. Now I like them in groups of 10, you can't bring them in a 5-man unit, they just don't do enough. You're mainly looking for 6s to wound. Now what I like about them is, I don't deep strike them, I put them in the back of the field and I guard the largest area possible so that character models, infantry characters in particular, they're not going to step out because they know the death marks are waiting. So it kind of holds those characters back in place behind terrain in your opponent's deployment zones. And even if you're not firing at characters, they've still got a decent strength 5, -2 AP weapon, and you could fire that at standard infantry, just like the Immortals could, I suppose. So I'm going to stick these in B. I'm going to put them probably in front of the Acrinthrites, but they are there, thereabouts. Right, next we're on the Catan shard of the Deceiver. This one is a real tricky one because all the Catans are good, all of them. Every single one is good, but there are some that are better than others. And if you're going to get them, you're going to get the good ones, right? You're going to get the Nightbringer. Some of you like the Void Dragon too. And the Transcendent Ctan is actually also another option because it's a little bit cheaper. So out of the 3 named Catans and the Transcendent Ctan, the Deceiver is probably the worst one. But by no means is it crap. It's pretty good. I mean, the Grand Illusion ability to mess with your deployment, I think is a pretty useful ability. Now when Strategic Reserves became free, this was less useful because that was a little bit of a trick of ours, putting units into Strategic Reserves without paying for it, but when it became free, what's the point, right? Also, the unique Catan power that it has, I think it's pretty good against certain factions, but because it's being compared purely against the Nightbringer and the Void Dragon, that's what lets it down. You're just not going to select it over those. So I was planning for B- here, but I'm going to have to go with C. I can't go any higher than that with the Deceiver, even though I really do like the unit. Okay, on to that's the Lokhust Lord, isn't it? The Lokhust Lord is next. Now I've got to say, I actually like the Lokhust Lord. At the start of the edition, I rarely used him. I didn't really see its full potential, and I thought him alongside the Skorpekh Lord were just not needed. The ability to reroll 1s to wound for destroy cult units just wasn't really needed. Those units are pretty powerful as they are on their own, so I didn't see a need for them. But in the later editions, I mean, I did a Ghost Ark spam list, and I can't remember if that was a part of my list or if I took it out, but no, I did take it out because I wanted another Ghost Ark in there. But originally he was in the list, and I geared him up with the Phylactery ability, was it the Nano Scarab casket, with the one that gives him the +1 to the Living Metal ability, and the Command Protocol, which gives you another 1 to your Living Metal. So every single turn in our command phase, he was getting D3 +2 wounds returned. So effectively, if he wasn't wiped out in one, he was going back to almost full wounds, if not full wounds. And I had him as a bit of a beat stick. He was in a Ghost Ark. He was going to go up the board, jump out, and just cause mayhem, tie up stuff. That was the idea with him. Now we then got the Annihilation Legion, which also gave him a bit of a use because he got his own unique play. He's got his own unique Warlord trait and relics, or relic. So definitely a very usable character, although Games Workshop, I think actually they removed the model, didn't they? Lokhust Destroyer, Lokhust Destroyer, it's the Lokhust Lord, sorry. Lokhust Lord, it's another one that is going to be in the B area. It's not one that, even though I do like it, it's not one that I would say, yeah, I'm definitely looking at that every time. Which kind of makes me look at Anrkayr The Traveller now, you know? I don't look at him every single game. I don't think, you know what, can I do with him today? I might bring him down. I'm going to bring Anrkayr The Traveller down, B+, but I'm going to keep that Lokhust Lord behind him. So as I said, I don't really look at him every single game, every single list as I'm building it. Can I get Anrkayr in this list? Whereas with the Command Barge, I do that. Doesn't always make it in the list, but I do actually think about it. Whereas Anrkayr The Traveller, I don't do that. So yeah, I'm going to throw him down a little bit. Let's get on to the Lokhust Destroyers. Not the heavy version, just the standard ones. I know you can get one heavy Lokhust in the unit itself, but we're not going to do that at this moment. Lokhust Destroyers. This one's hard for me because for most of the edition I didn't use them. I didn't actually own the models until probably about 8 months ago. I felt like I was missing out. So I went and got the models. They did really well for me. But I've just not really used them enough to say whether I know enough about them. I know that's a really bad thing for me to say because I'm the Necron channel here. But in terms of like theory hammer, you know, just purely going off how they should work in your head rather than actually playing them on the tabletop, that's what I'm going to do. I mean, I've got a bit of experience, don't get me wrong. So that's... Oh, this one's a tricky one. I'm going to stick him in B. I'm going to stick them in B. I'm going to sort of go around this area here. Maybe sort of around here. Sort of around here. Do I put them below the death marks? No, you know what? I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave them there. And if something comes to me midway through this video, I will amend it. Right, there's still a long way to go here, guys. Don't know how long we've been going for. But let's get on to the next one. The Doom Scythe. Doom Scythe is one of our Necron flyers. Pretty good anti-tank weaponry. I used it a fair bit. I tend to play 1k a little bit more than 2k because I find that more fun. And it's a little bit more chilled out. And in terms of time, you just get more time to play it, I suppose. So when you're playing that kind of level, you tend to not take the flyers as often because you want bodies on the ground to take objectives and that because you don't have that much at 1k. This is hard because they're like... The guns are pretty much on par with like the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, and they're one of my favourite units, if not my favourite unit. I'm going to go with A. No, I'm not. I'm not going to go with A. I'm going to go with B. I'm going to go with B. I feel like they should be at the bottom of A. You know what? I'm going to go bottom of A. Bottom of A for now. I know he's going to keep changing throughout, but I'm feeling like the bigger games, when I brought them out, they done me bits and they weren't targeted because there's other badder things on the battlefield. So they got to last a little bit longer than normal. So I'm going to go with A for now. Right, that is a Doomstalker. We kind of know where this is going, don't we? Doomstalkers, similar problems to the Doomsday Arks. D6 amount of shots, D6 amount of damage. They're not even hitting on a 3+, they're hitting on a 4+. They don't have quantum shielding, although they do have the containment field invulnerable save. They're a monster, so they didn't get core. When we all got core, well, when we all got core, I'm not a Necron vehicle, but when all the vehicles got core, the Doomstalker wasn't one of those because it is a monster. So unfortunately that's going to go behind the Doomsday Ark in D tier. Oh, next one is interesting, the Obelisk. Obelisk is a hard one, or is it? Is it a hard one? Now I've recently fell in love with the Obelisk. I wrote it off throughout most of the edition. I then had a few games with it and fell in love with it. And then I started looking at some math hammer thinking, why aren't people liking this? I mean, I did a video, in fact, you guys may have seen it already. If not, check that from the playlist. There's a lot of maths in that video. I can't remember it now because I did it quite a few months ago, but there was a crap load of shots that were strength 8, that were 2 damage coming out of this thing when you buffed it up in a certain way. And virtually nothing survived if this thing shoots at it. And that's what I fell in love with, I guess. I think the real problem is, I think a lot of people don't like to admit this, but the problem is it's a Forge World model. Well, it's in the Forge World box, if you know what I mean. And it comes in the same box as the Tesseract bolts. And you also get that, what do you get in there? Transcendent Ctan shard. Now the problem is most people that I've spoke to would prefer to use the Vault. I mean, it looks cooler as well, don't get me wrong. The Vault is a much cooler unit, especially when it got their points reduced. I know we're not talking about the Vault right now, but you got to consider them because when you're buying, it's £100 in the UK to buy this box. That's really expensive. Probably our most expensive. Is that our most expensive model? I think it is. When you've got the option of building the Tesseract Bolt or the Obelisk, most people say, you know what, I'm doing the Bolt. That's the better model. And they weren't then prepared to pay another £100 to do the Obelisk. Now you could potentially magnetize it. You have to do a little bit of fiddling because, yeah, it's not that straightforward. And I think that's why this model kind of got put, you know, under the rug. People weren't interested in it. They weren't interested in spending the money on it. And they just kind of said it stank. And again, it's very similar to the Monolith as well. At the start of the edition, it didn't get the Dynasty buffs. You had to pay CP to use it. People just weren't prepared to go out of their way to get this model, which probably would just sit on their shelf. Now, late edition, it got the Dynasty buffs. Late edition, you didn't have to spend CP for it. And when I started using it, it did fantastic for me. That being said, Obelisk. Oof. I'm going to go with... Oh. Because we're talking about the entire edition here, I'm going to go C. Top of C. Now, if we're talking about purely Arks of Omen, sort of when I started playing it, if you like, I would put it up. But I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with it. But I'm going to go with C for now. I mean, I think a lot of people won't even agree with C. They probably go right D, bottom of D tier, end of story. But it's better than that. It really is. You just need to try it out. Trust me. But it's not better than the models that I've got in B here. Maybe the Acrinthrites. Are the Acrinthrites a B tier? No, you know what? They're not. What am I doing? I think the Acrinthrites need to come down. I'm going to put them down. That's another change in this video. Right, Flayed Ones next. Flayed Ones. Let's try and speed this up because there's still a long way to go. Necron Flayed Ones. Let me just have a little look at my notes. Yeah, they're good. I mean, they're cheap. 10 points a model. They've got the deep strike ability. They're pretty good in melee. Very usable for behind enemy lines. Engage on all fronts. Get into those back end objectives. Also could potentially be used as another screen, but you've got Canoptek Scarabs, I guess. But for me, they are going up into A tier. Probably there, you know. May even be there. Just behind the command barge. So right at this moment in time, I've got them in 3rd place, which is actually quite high. Okay, let's move on. Immortals next. We've got the Immortals. I'm just going to double check if there's any other Immortal units in this tier list. I may be missing them. My eyes may not be working. That's Immortal, right? So both the weapons, sorry, are in here. In fact, I'm going to put them together so that we can do them at the same time. So first up, we've got the Gauss Blasters on the Immortals. Gauss Blasters, strength 5, -2 AP, 1 damage. Rapid fire 1, 30-inch range. They were troops. So when you did require troops, which was most of the edition, we required a troop option for your patrol, of your battalion, or even your brigade detachments. You needed troops. And Immortals were the go-to because Necron Warriors were too expensive. They only work in units of 20, really, unless you're taking them in Ghost Arks. Again, we'll save that till we talk about Warriors. But Immortals were the cheaper option, 80 points for 5. Just throw them in your back end, leave them there, holding an objective, job done. So, in terms of the weaponry, I mean, they're going up there into sort of A tier, maybe even S tier, you know. No, they got to be at A tier. They can't be S tier because Arks of Omen, they're not used anymore. So A tier, they're going to be going in, both of them. It just depends on what order we want because the Gauss Blasters, I think a lot of people preferred them. They had a better range. I preferred the Tesla Carbines, but I play a lot of demons, so they kind of work better for me. The AP kind of doesn't mean anything with a demon save. But I'm going to go like this. I'm going to put the Gauss Blasters first, followed by the Tesla Carbines. Now bear in mind this is throughout the entire of 9th edition, not just Arks of Omen. Okay, next on to the Ghost Arks. I love the Ghost Arks. Yeah, one of my favourite units. I know I say this quite often with a lot of units, but these really are one of my favourite units. Used as a battering ram rather than a transport. With objectives secured, you just throw them. If you've got lots of them, it's even better. Just throw them at your enemy units, especially shooty ones, so that they can't actually fire back, especially if they're infantry, in fact. If your objective secured, you're still in objective, unless they've got objectives secured as well, when then you're not, are you? They've got the speed, they've got the quantum shielding, they've got 14 wounds, the Gauss Flare arrays that can be shot into combat. You could take a Lokhust Lord inside there, you could take the 10 warriors inside there. I absolutely love these, and some of my later lists, I think had 6 of these in there, because the rule of 3 doesn't actually apply to dedicated transport. And this is my tier list after all, it isn't your tier list, this is my tier list. So I should kind of do what I want to do, and I'm going to go with this. They're going up into S tier. I know a lot of you may pull them back to A or even B, but for me, they were absolutely fantastic. Okay, next we've got the Hexmark Destroyer. Okay. Another Marmite situation here, very similar to the Death Marks. Sometimes they did something, sometimes they didn't. I prefer to use them more to score points rather than to kill stuff, which is a little bit backwards because they're there to kill stuff. It's a destroyer unit. The weapons worked against some factions. What was it? Strength 6, -1 AP, 1 damage. And every time you remove a model, you get to do another shot. If you give it the Gauntlet of the Conflagrator Relic, it was removing a ton of models, especially in hordes. Not so much against elite infantry like Space Marines. So yeah, very situational, but could do behind enemy lines. You could take a Plasma Sight alongside it to get those, you know, to max out behind enemy lines every turn. But only worked in some situations, very similar to the Death Mark. So I think I'm going to be going with, let's have a think, B. I'm going to go with B, and I'm going to promote them up to here, just over the Monolith, I think. Throughout the edition, they were worth it. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. Right, next we've got Illuminor Szeras, which is one of our named HQs with all the super buffs. Can use Rites of Reanimation twice, can buff units with the Augmentation ability. A pretty good unit, but unfortunately quite expensive and didn't have an Immortals save. However, there was a point in the edition where he was actually better than having a Technomancer. I can't remember when it was now. I think it was when it was the Silent King had core and we were bringing back Tricomineers. And if you didn't want to have a Zerrican Dynasty, you could take Illuminor Szeras because he had the Dynastic Agent ability. So you could still say use the Novak Dynasty, bring this guy, he can bring back a Tricomineer for the Silent King, even though neither of those are from the Novak Dynasty. I don't know if I can stick him in A, you know. Can I stick him in A? He's not on Immortal level. He's not on Immortal level, that's for sure. Anrkayr level? Yeah. I'm going to sort of stick him in between these two. Right, Imotekh The Stormlord. That is Imotekh The Stormlord, isn't it? Yeah, Nemesis over there. I always get them mixed up. Imotekh The Stormlord. Now, unfortunately, Imotekh The Stormlord is from the Tesseract Dynasty. If he was from all the dynasties, you know, a dynastic agent, or just didn't have any, you know, any dynasty kind of thing, he would be brilliant. His abilities are pretty good. He's still got the My Will Be Done like an Overlord and all those abilities. Okay, you can't select a relic. Okay, you can't select the Warlord trait. You're going to get given the Warlord trait if you do pay for it. But because he's tied to the dynasty that is probably the worst dynasty we've got in 9th edition or throughout 9th edition, you've got to penalise him for that. So even though he is great, and if you are using the Tesseract Dynasty, brilliant, but unfortunately, you're not. Here's the thing, right? I need to think about this first, because I only used him when I played with the Tesseract Dynasty, of course. That's the only time you can use him. And when I used him, he done well, because he's actually a good model. So when I used him, he played well. It's just being able to select him is the problem, isn't it? So it depends on how we're judging this, doesn't it? Are we judging this on how they do on the battlefield, or are we judging this on everything, you know, selectability? I mean, with the Deceiver does well on the battlefield, but it's less selectable, so I've got to be fair here. If I did it to the Deceiver, I've got to also do it to Imotekh. I'm going to stick him at the back of C. Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. I can't keep saying it's my favourite unit because I've already said that too many times. The Ghost Ark is my favourite unit. Lokhust Heavy Destroyers are up there. Maybe my best synergy. We'll talk about that synergy in a moment. We know where this is going. They're going in S. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. They're going top of the list. I bring them in every single list. Whether it's 3, whether it's 6, whether it's 9. I bring them in every single list. Normally with the Technomancer alongside them. I'll talk about that when we get onto the Technomancer. Okay, the Necron Lord. Necron Lord. This one's another one that is not a bad model. He's not a bad unit. He gives the buffs. He just... The problem is, why would you select a Necron Lord when for a small amount more points you can just get an Overlord that has an in-run save, that's a Relentless March, My Will Be Done, much better in combat. That's the real problem with the Necron Lord. And if you're going to go cheap, there are cheap options still with the Cryptex, so like a Chronomancer for example. So for me, unfortunately, the Necron Lord is going to go to the back of C. I'm going to go D. I don't use it. I don't select it. I don't think about using it. I've got no real need to. Even though I really do like it, the idea of him is really cool. I think he needs a rework for 10th. Okay, we've got the Crypt Thralls. Crypt Thralls, they're quite useful, but I tend to use that Cryptic Arcana, the Prismatic Obfuscation, you know what I'm on about. I tend to take that quite often, so I don't need this with the Crypt Thralls to shield my Cryptex. That being said, they are still pretty good. I mean, it's only 40 points and you're getting a lot of pistol shots. They're not bad in combat. When they're near a Cryptek, they're doing those, they're getting extra abilities and defending them at the same time. So, do I consider them more than Death Marks? Probably yes. Do I consider them more than a Monolith? Probably yes. That's probably where it stops though, because now I start to think about scoring with a Hexmark. So yeah, I'm going to go there for now. Nemesor Zahndrekh. Well, already this is a big problem. It's the Tesseract Dynasty again. If you are playing Tesseract, you're taking Imotekh. You're taking Imotekh The Stormlord. You've got no real reason to take the Nemesor here, so I'm just going to stick him in D. I'm going to stick him at the back. I mean, I don't like the model. I don't like the unit. I don't like the fact that he looks like he's dabbing. Imotekh's a lot better. No, not for me. Night Scythe. Night Scythe is at the start of the edition. Very CP heavy to do the trick with the Prismatic Dimensional Breach, getting in your Lich Guard and all those kind of models, getting them into combat with a nice easy charge. Later in the edition, Strategic Reserves is free, so this became much more useful. It was already good, but it became even better at the top of B. No, not at the top of B. Yeah, I'm going to go with Anrkayr The Traveller, because that is definitely something I would consider at the same time. Those kind of models, Novak Dynasty kind of stuff. Let me shift because I'm getting aches on my bum again. yeah, Anrkayr The Traveller with the Novak Dynasty is kind of in the same thought process as a Night Scythe, so that's what I'm going to do. Top of B tier. Nightbringer time. Yes, Nightbringer is an absolute beast. Now, I know in my previous video with Nick that we did, I kind of spoke badly about him, a bit of a letdown for me. At the start of the edition, he was brilliant. Not much could take him on. There weren't many codexes earlier on in the edition. Now, he does have his weaknesses, which is the psychic phase, the first weakness there. If you can take 3 wounds in the psychic phase, 3 wounds in the shooting phase, 3 wounds in the fight phase, he is finished in 1 turn. And that was a problem. I mean, at Nick's tournament, I played him against Blood Angels. He wiped out a unit of Incestors and then he was dead. Instantly dead. That happens quite a lot. And when he's the points cost he is, I think he started off at, I think he started off at 370. I might be wrong there. He went down to what, 320? Still too expensive. I don't think they've got the stats and the datasheet quite right with the Nightbringer. To start the edition, I would have said S and moved on, but I can't do that now. I'm going to go with top of B. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Top of B. He's definitely a thought process in every game, which would make him there really, but I don't pick him every game, so that's why, yeah, I'm happy. Oh, okay, what are we like? We're probably halfway now. Ophydian Destroyers. I personally don't use them a lot. I don't like them. They've got the tunneling in ability, effectively deep strike, isn't it? They're better at it because they're a bit more resilient. They're not as resilient as the Skorpekh Destroyers. They're not as choppy as the Skorpekh Destroyers, but they are quicker. You can take a plasma sight with them so you can get behind enemy lines, but that's not their game. Their game isn't point scoring, their game is killing. And that's where the problem becomes, because they're a little bit too expensive to, you know, deep strike in and score points, because you can do it with Flayed Ones. They're a little bit too expensive to be killing because you can just get Skorpekh Destroyers. For me personally, they're like around here. I think for a lot of people they'd be bumped up a little bit more to the top of B perhaps. I just don't use them, so I can't really put them any further than that. Orikan The Diviner. Oh god, this is probably one of the worst models in the codex. It's an out-of-date model. Your datasheet kind of sucks. You very rarely get him to his empowered datasheet profile. If you do, it'll be too late in the game. He's more expensive than a standard Chronomancer. Okay, he can do it on Catan shards because it's not on a Dynasty unit. Yeah, not for me. He's going right down there. I'm not taking him over a Doomstalker. No way. Right, an Overlord. Standard Overlord, generic Overlord. You can kit him out any way you like. You can stick a Resurrection Orb on him. Any other relics, any other Warlord traits. It's a DIY HQ, which I really like. I like the Command Barge more, but sometimes points becomes a little bit too tight and you can't afford a Command Barge, so you have to downgrade to an Overlord. For me, it's got to be in the same breath as a Command Barge. If you've got the points, Command Barge. If you haven't, Overlord. Both of them are very good. You can do them as whatever you want with them. They're always a consideration. Given that Mine Will Be Done's ability as well, you can stick the Fair One ability stratagem on them to get the 2 Mine Will Be Dones going off. Right, we've got the Plasma Sight next. I only really used it for point scoring. Reason being is, okay, you can get a +1 to your attacks and your +1s to your... What was the other thing you can do? +1 attack, +1 strength. But with the command protocols being unlocked sort of 1/3 or maybe halfway into the edition, we could just use the Protocol of Hungry Void to get +1 strength. So those Skorpekh Destroyers in particular go from strength 7 to strength 8 with the bigger weapons. So these weren't needed. However, they can still score you points, I guess. They didn't take up a battlefield role either. I'm just going to stick them alongside the Crypt Throws. How often did I take them over Death Marks? None. No. Top of C. Top of C. I definitely took Death Marks a lot more than the Plasma Sights. Right, Plasmancer is next. Not one that I used. I mean, his unique Cryptek Arcana, which is the orbital, you know, the bomb thing, never makes it, that never does anything, does it? It kind of just pushes people away. Doesn't actually do any damage. He's not very quick. His weapon is okay, I guess. But you may as well just take more Technomancers and more Chronomancers than a Plasmancer. Although he is kind of like a... I know it's not a Psyker, but it's like having a Psyker. He does a lot of mortal wounds, but you do have to get quite close to do them. I found that to be quite a hindrance for him. I'm going to stick him in C. And it's going above the Deceiver. I'm going to go there. After the Obelisk. That makes the Obelisk look really bad now, doesn't it? It does, doesn't it? It's way better than that. I just can't... You guys need to test it out. Right. You know what? I'm going to swap them. I'm going to swap them. Bang. Stick him at the top of C. Right, moving on. That is the Triarch Praetorian. Is there only one option here, or is there two? Let me just double check. That is Lichguard. There's not a lot left, to be fair. Right, Triarch Praetorian. It's just the whole unit here. Weapons aren't being separated. Another unit that I very rarely use. There's just better options. These can fight, they can shoot. Jack of all trades, master of none. They didn't do much in either of the phases. Also, you got to kind of predict what weapons you need as well, which I think is a problem. If you're going into a blind game, you've got to predict if you want the damage 1 or damage 2 weapons, and if you get that wrong, the unit's virtually redundant. Now, if you know who you're going up against, then you are tailor listing your list. In friendlies, that's not very fun, tailor listing. Unless you're both doing it, then it's okay, I guess. If it's a tournament that you know your opponent's list, but if you know their list, then that means you've already provided your list, so you can't change it anyway, right? So these were a little bit potluck. They didn't have an invuln save. All they had was speed, but then they died. So for me, C. I'm going down to there. Psychomancer. Right, this is the worst Cryptek. It absolutely stinks. When it came out at the start of the edition, or just before the start of the edition, there was a lot of promise. A lot of people bigged it up. A lot of big channels said it's an auto-include with all the abilities it has. Never in a million years. I tried it a few times at the start of the edition and I said this absolutely stinks. The ability is only 12 inches. It's not enough. Yes, you can slow your opponent's units down if they're melee units. Yes, you can turn off OBSEC. It has flexibility, don't get me wrong, but it's only moving naturally at 5 inches. Okay, you can put the Veil of Darkness relic on it perhaps. It's one use only though. Perhaps you can stick him in a Ghost Ark, but that's just not how you do it. So, not for me. This one sucks, and I'm going to stick him in D, and it's going to go there. Yeah, I'm happy with that. It's going to go mid D. Right, Reanimator. This is a fun one. A lot of you are probably waiting for this one. Canoptek Reanimator. I need to check my notes because I need to be careful with what I say here. Right, let's get into this. Right, I don't like the Canoptek Reanimator. Some of you don't like the Canoptek Reanimator. Some of you love the Canoptek Reanimator. You've probably got posters on your wall with Canoptek Reanimators all over the place. You absolutely love it. Good for you. At the start of the edition, it was, I can't remember the points, it was more than it is now, because it had a decrease midway. And the idea of it, at the first premise of it, was it's going to bring back warriors. Now I know it can do, bring back Skorpekh Destroyers, bring back Wraiths. It can go with any unit. It was kind of bigged up as a unit that helps Necron warriors in blobs of 20. Problem is, it didn't do that. Now again, I don't have the maths to hand here, and the video we did was probably years ago now. So top of my head, I'm just kind of trying to remember. You needed X amount of warriors to come back in a single turn on an exact roll of a 4 for that to happen. Now people were saying, oh, but a 4+ is a half a chance. But they already had a third of a chance without the Reanimator. They already have the 5+ reanimation roll with a Necron warrior already. So it's only down to a 4. It's only an exact roll of a 4 that makes any difference. So if you can get an exact roll of a 4 and count it on the side on a little notepad, how many you've got throughout the game, I guarantee you at the start of the edition at the very least, it was never making its points back. It stuck out like a sore thumb, very tall, no invulnerable save. Yes, you can hide it behind terrain and still do it with its aura, but it's not an aura, that's the problem. As soon as the warriors or Skorpekh Destroyers or Lichguard moved out of range of the Reanimator, the beam turned off. So it was an aura, but it wasn't an aura. If you wanted to change the focus of the aura, you need to spend 2 command points to put it somewhere else. And that was to your opponent's advantage, because they knew this. So if you got 2 Necron warrior units and a Reanimator in the middle, they target the first one, and you go, 2 command points, I'm going to change the beam to that warrior unit. But now the first unit hasn't got it, so then they start firing back at that one. You can't use the same stratagem again. You just wasted 2 command points. They decreased the points halfway through the edition, or roughly halfway, I don't know when it was now. Sometimes it makes its points back, sometimes it didn't. But it didn't do anything offensively. It didn't, it didn't attack anything that great. It's got a rapid fire weapon, and that's about it. It just wasn't worth taking. Wasn't worth taking. You may as well just take like a Technomancer, bring back D3, job done. Right, let's get into the tier, because I could go on all day about the Reanimator, how I dislike him. I'm getting round up now. Right, Reanimator. In fact, I do need to talk a little bit more about this, because I'm going to put him in the back of C. And now you're probably thinking, you've just given a little rant about how crap it is, and you've not even put it in D. Right, okay, let's go for round 2 of this. I'm going to big it up now. If you take it with a unit that's multi-wound models, like, for example, Canoptek Wraiths. If you lost 2 Canoptek Wraiths, you got 6 dice. The chances are 2 out of 6 of those dice will be a 5+ roll, because that's what averages say. One will be a 5, one will be a 6, that's averages. So you still won't get back your Canoptek Wraith. Now, if you had a Reanimator with those Wraiths and you lost 2 models, with your 6 dice in your reanimation pool, you roll all of them, needing a 4+, statistically or averagely, whatever you want to call it, 3 of those dice will be a 4+ roll, because that's how averages work. And that would in fact bring you back that Canoptek Wraith. So the Reanimator had some play in multi-wound models, we'll bring them with multi-wound models. Very situational, you got to lose 2 in order for that to work, or more of course. When you lose 1, it still was a bit iffy. But yeah, that's where I'm going to stick the Canoptek Reanimator, the back of C. It had some play, and I think it actually did pretty well on one of the big tournaments, one of the major tournaments that won for Necrons, had a Canoptek Reanimator in. So I've got to be fair and tell you that. Okay, next is the Royal Warden. Tricky, because at the start of the edition, brilliant. Having the ability to fall back and shoot, nobody else had it because we were the only codex. Falling back and shoot with 20 Necron Warriors, because that's what we used to do at the start of the edition, was brilliant. I think I took out a Bloodthirster in one of my early games of 9th edition, because I used a Royal Warden to fall back, bang bang bang, off you go. Now throughout the edition, we started to use Warriors less, because they weren't worth it, they were just getting wiped out. We were taking Immortals and putting points elsewhere. So the Royal Wardens were just less useful. What were you going to use them for? The best use of them was 20 Necron Warriors. You still could use them with Lichguard perhaps, but you may as well take Anrkayr The Traveller or something along those lines rather than a Royal Warden. So yeah, good at the start of the edition, bad for the remainder of the edition. I don't think it even should be a HQ. I know HQs are gone for 10th edition, it doesn't really work like that anymore. You just need a character, which is a good change, but it should have been an elite for 9th edition. I'm going to stick him sort of Lord level. That's what he should be really, he should be sort of Necron Lord level. Both of them should be elite models. Right, next we've got the Canoptek Scarab Swarms. This one's an easy one. We all know where this is going, straight into S tier. Yeah, they've got to be the top of the tier group, because they've got so much versatility, because you can have min units of 3, they can hide into your own deployment zone to, anti-deep strike. You can have min units of 3 with objectives secured, stealing objectives, and because you've only spent 45 points, who cares if they die? Take units of 5 of them and have them as a nice screen for maybe a Nightbringer perhaps. You can have big units of 9 with the Chronomancer's Chronometron ability and just throw them up the battlefield. Get onto an objective, again objective secured. Tie down a unit for most of the game. They're just brilliant. They're brilliant for scoring. They can do ancient machineries because they are Canoptek. They've got the fly keyword, they're moving rapid, they've got 4 wounds a pop, 15 points a model. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and I hope they don't get degraded or nerfed for 10th. Right, next we have the Transcendent Ctan shards. Now the shards they're all pretty good, as we've already kind of alluded to the Ctan shards already when we spoke about the Deceiver and the Nightbringer. I'm going to stick him alongside the Nightbringer. Now that might sound quite wild, but because it's so much cheaper, and always has been so much cheaper, less so towards the end of the edition because the others got reduced in price, but because he's so cheap, if you did want a Ctan shard to throw up the battlefield and be your Carnifex, if you like, scaring your opponent, making them need to target it, you're doing it much cheaper with the Transcendent Ctan shard. And you can also select your buffs, because it's a generic Ctan, you can select which bonuses you want to take pre-game. So yeah, a very usable Ctan shard, and very cost effective as well. Only, what was it, 200 let me have a check, because I can't remember off the top of my head. 230 points, I think that's a pretty good price. Right, let's move on to this big bad boy, which is the Seraptic Heavy Construct. Now admittedly, I don't own this model, so I don't want to sort of put out these false experiences, because I don't have that much with it. I have played a game with it, but not that, well, just the one really, so I don't want to say that I have all the experience in the world with it. But again, going to Theory Hammer here, this thing is scary, but it costs 600 points. That's the big problem, 600 points, toughness 8, 28 wounds, 3+ armor save, has a 5+ invulnerable save, it's Titanic so it can do all that jazz. The weapons you get to choose from, which are pretty good. The problem is, like for example, the Strength 16 weapon, which is the Synaptic Obliterator. D3 shots, you get 2 of them in fact, so it'd be 2 D3 shots, average of 4 shots. It only takes a single invulnerable save to block it. That was the problem with the edition. Halfway through, almost everything had an invuln save. So it became more useful to take lots of shots that were like the Obelisk. Lots of shots that are Strength 8 that you're going to guarantee to get through those invulnerable saves, rather than taking that one lucky shot that breaks through. And then not only that, if they fail their invulnerable saves, come on, reroll, bang, they get a 5+. It just didn't do much. That was the problem with it. Now in melee, of course, it was an absolute monster. Strength 16 with 5 damage is pretty good. Or having 12 attacks at Strength 8 was also pretty good. But for 600 points, no, not for me. I mean, in your fun games, yeah, of course. When you're having a little friendly game, why not? But competitively, not a chance. I'm going to put it at the top of D. Now, I always wanted to do a list where I had the Silent King and 2 of these sort of on the leashes. Like, off you go, heavy constructs. And the Silent King with the double mile will be done. I thought would have been a pretty cool list, but that would have been, what, 600, 1,400 points is that? Just for those 3 units. And the 2 Trichomoneers on top of that, I suppose. Okay, we're on to one of the, well, another flyer. There's a Forge World flyer, which is the Night Shroud. Night Shroud, it's got the bombing ability. It stinks. It's not a transport. It's not really doing much other than that one use only bomb. I'm going to do that. I mean, if I place... Oh, no. Maybe not. Maybe that. If I'm playing Tech, I'm not taking him still. Would I take him over Orikan? Nah. I think it stinks. I'm going to go with that. I'm okay with that. I don't want to talk too much about it because no one cares about it, right? Right, Skorpekh Destroyers. One of our best melee outlays in the Codex itself. They were a new unit for 9th edition. Came with the Indomitus box set. One of the shining stars in that box set, in fact. There's only one place for these guys. It's going to be S tier. It's just a question of where. Yes, over the Ghost Arks. I mean, for me personally, no. And this tier list is mine, I suppose. So I maybe should think about doing it my way rather than the way. I'm going to go with that. I use Ghost Arks more than Skorpekh Destroyers, believe it or not. I don't play melee as often as I do shooty. So, and when I do have melee units, it's usually Lich Guard with the sword and shield. So it's not really melee, it's more about holding ground. But I know the power of these things. They take out anything they get hold of, and if you buff them correctly, they are good. Obviously, you guys can switch these around how you want, but for me, I just love Ghost Arks, and they've got to be up there. I'm even considering putting them up one, but Chronomancers do just get a lot more playability. And talking of Skorpechs, we're going on to the Skorpekh Lord next. Skorpekh Lord. Skorpekh Lord. I have a bone to pick the Skorpekh Lord. I said this in the video we did recently. In the cinematic trailer of 9th edition, this guy was the poster boy. He was the guy that picked up some Space Marines and chopped them in bits. And yeah, we looked like we were going to get this mega monster melee unit for Necrons. That wasn't the case. He was actually a lot smaller than he looked in the video. He was only an infantry character. He then had mediocre weapons and a mediocre stat line with 6 wounds, strength 6. Okay, the Harvester Cannon. No, the Harvester Cannon, that's a different unit completely. Hyperphase Harvester, not the Harvester Cannon. Is that Soul Grinder? Jeez, what am I doing? Right, so he's hitting on 2s, he's rerolling 1s. That's pretty good. Strength goes to strength 8 with that Harvester. He's got multi-flex in terms of the weaponry, because he can choose the melee weapon, and he's got a little bit of an outgoing with the shooting phase. Not the best though, but he's 130 points, and we're talking about Command Barge kind of level now, and it was just too expensive. But I think all of the Necron HQs were just not in the right places for points, so once they put this Skorpekh Lord in with the points, they didn't know where to put it. He had to be more than an Overlord, he had to be more than some of the named guys, but he couldn't be as much as a Command Barge. They kind of just put him in that spot. But I think if all of them were corrected, he'd have a better place. So for me, C. Okay, this one is the Sentry... I always get these mixed up. Have I done the Sentry Pylon or have I done the Gauss Pylon? Either way, it's going in D. We're not using pylons. Sod that. I don't know which one's better. I don't even know which one's which. I'm not using these fortification things that are so expensive. I know one of them isn't expensive, one of them is cheaper, because you get the smaller ones with min units, but... You know what, I should. Right, let's do it. Let's do this for the video, even though I don't really use them. I believe this one is the fort, right? These are the 100-point ones, and you get between 1 and 3. I'm checking this on Wikipedia because I don't really use them enough. So toughness 8, no, toughness 7, 8 wounds. They don't move, they don't fight. They're sitting ducks. They're a fortification, to be fair. They're not meant to move, so not like the other one. Just why? What's the point of it? It's not scoring secondaries. I'm going to put it in front of the Gauss Pylon. So maybe you can get 3 of them as anti-deep strike, but come on. 300 points for 3 of them? When you can just get the other fortification for 80 points? Come on, well, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're better than that. And that's that. Right. Canoptek, is that Canoptek Spyders? My eyes are deceiving me. Yes, the picture was a little bit hard to see there. Canoptek Spyders. I love these. Great in melee, strength 8. You can boost this further with Hungry Void, Novak, all that jazz. They can also shoot. They're monsters, so they can shoot into combat. They were also pretty good in the Cult of the Cryptek Army of Renown. They had a lot of stratagems that boosted the weapon. Was it the weapon skill or the ballistic skill? I can't remember now. It boosted something there. It also boosted the Gloom Prism, which is another thing they can take as a standard, you know, in the standard dynasties. They can repair things, and if you've got the Zerrican Dynasty, you can also repair the Silent King with the Fabricated Claw Array. These things did everything. Now, why I love them, this is just a personal little trophy of mine. At the very start of the edition, this might have also been the very first game as well, in fact. I had a unit of 3 of these. I lost one. Reanimation roll. Rolled all 6. 5+. Got him back, and I was just like, yes. Have I ever seen that again? No, never, ever, ever. I probably never will see that again. Overall, these guys are fantastic. They bring back Canoptek Scarabs as well. If you take them in a synergy with the Technomancer can be bringing those back because they're core. They bring the Scarabs back. You can take the Failsafe Overcharger, the Canoptek Control Node for a +1. There's loads of stuff you can do with them with the Technomancer in particular. Battery change, there we go. Yeah, what was I saying? There's loads of stuff you can do with the Technomancer, with the Canoptek Spyders. For me, they're A tier. It's just a question of where. I think they're top of A tier. I think they've got to be top. They're not S tier, but I think they are top of A tier. They're not an auto-include. They are quite expensive once you start going hard on them with the Particle Beamers, as well as the Gloom Prism. But I think, especially in 2K games, you are bringing them. So for me, top of A. Triarch Stalker's next. This one's another tricky one, you know, because I like the Triarch Stalkers. My list I know I've mentioned Nick a few times in this video now, but I did a collab with Nick halfway into the edition. It wasn't a direct collab, we were sort of doing lists and reviewing each other's lists in a separate video. My list had the Silent King and 2 Triarch Stalkers. I originally had the Command Barge, but totally forgot that the Dynasty buffs for my Will Be Done are not going to work on the Triarch Stalkers. I keep calling them Triarch Stalkers when they're not Triarch Stalkers. Triarch Stalkers, they're not far off, right? But yeah, with the Silent King, they don't need to have that Dynasty keyword, and that's where I thought this will be really cool. They can shoot, they can fight, all the rerolls from the Silent King. So that was my little trick mid-edition. Overall, I don't think many people like them. I think they're not that great in melee, not that many attacks. In fact, they should have a lot more attacks. It's just pretty poor how many attacks they got, in fact. But I'm gonna go with I'm gonna stick them at the back of B. Don't know if I'm doing them a little bit of a disjustice there, but I think the back of B is okay. They're definitely not C. Now I'm thinking the obelisk. What am I doing with the obelisk down there? I'm gonna keep coming back to this throughout the video because I love the obelisk, and I'm gonna move it. I'm gonna move it at the very least there for now. No, there. I'm gonna move it to there. It may go up and down throughout the video, but by the end of this video there will be a final resolution. Right, next we've got the Technomancer. Okay, Technomancer, we all know again. That seems to be what I say when it's an S tier. We all know where this is going. S tier. It's a question of where. Me personally, it's going... Ooh, this is tricky, you know. This is tricky. Is it better than the Skorpekh Destroyers for me? Yes. Better than the Ghost Ark for me? Yes. Because to me, he's an auto-include. I take him every list. Ghost Arks are not every list, although I love them. Chronomancer, do I take them in every list? No. Most lists, yes, but not every list. So it's got to be above that. Lokhust Destroyers and Scarabs, do I take them in every list? Yes. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put him at the front. I'm going to put him at the top. The reason being, A, he can be your Warlord if you don't want to go spending points on Command Barge and stuff. B, he can take relics like the Veil of Darkness relic. Warlord traits. I mean, our Warlord trait's kind of stuck, but you got the option. You got the option of the the Arcana. He's got the rights of reanimation ability. He can be bringing back D3 warriors or a single core model from a unit. Again, I alluded to Lokhust Heavy Destroyers earlier in the video. That's what my synergy trick is. I take 3 Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, Technomancers with the Prismatic Dimensional Breach. No, not that one. The Prismatic Obfuscation, that's the one. And the Canoptek Cloak, so I can heal D3 and bring a model back, unless the unit is completely wiped. But if it's like deployment, I hide them behind terrain so they don't get targeted anyway, and then pop them out in a firing lane and bang, off they go. If I've got 6 of them, I may drop the Arcana, because there's usually enough models to have that Lookout Sir bubble, and also the Technomancer can hide behind terrain anyway. But so many games I play, like for example I play Tyranids loads of times in the league in fact, and so often they'll go for my Lokhust Heavy Destroyers because I was targeting their monsters. The Maleceptor gone, 1 turn, Trigon gone, 1 turn, so they were like, right, we need to deal with the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, so they'll get in their Tyrannofexes and their Exocrines out, going after my Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, not finishing the unit. And I was simply going, right, heal D3 to that one, bring another model back, they're back to full wounds, back to full unit. And my opponent's face is just like, wow, they not only just took out my Maleceptor, but I've just thrown everything at them from range, and they're just back. I love it, absolutely love it. That is my number 1 synergy, in fact, with the Technomancer. And I've already spoken about my number 2 as well. That sounds really weird. I've spoke about my number 2. Can we cut that? Probably not. My number 2 selection in terms of synergy was with the Spyders. Yeah, Technomancer's going top of A. Top of A? Top of S. Top of S. We're still here, right. Next we have the Tesseract Ark. Tesseract Ark is a Forge Well model, very expensive to buy, very expensive in terms of points to field. Good weapons, has the containment field, invulnerable save and quantum shielding. Makes it a lot more resilient, but it doesn't have as many wounds as some of the other heavies. That made it a bit of a problem. They go down quite fast. The great thing about this is, which in fact is something I completely missed earlier in the video with regards to the Doomsday Ark and the Canoptek Doomstalker, is they got to remain stationary for their high powered profile of their weapons. This thing can just move around and fire as normal. They've also got the flexible weapon as well. You get to select from 3 different profiles, so you can go anti-infantry, anti-elite, anti-tank. So very flexible. I just wish I had a few more wounds, but they're going to be B. I'm just trying to work out where in B. Nightbringer no, Tesseract no. Ooh, we're getting sort of towards that stage. I'm going to go with around here for me. That's where, in terms of how I played them, how often I played them, I think more than those models. Oh, Hexmark. Now I'm thinking about this. I think the Hexmark's too low for me now, you know. I'm going to bump the Hexmark up quite a bit, because thinking about it, I used it quite a lot. I just didn't kind of realise until now. Like, I used it but for point scoring again. And I know that's not the way you play Hexmark, but I was gathering a lot of points from it and I was using it, and this is my tier list. I'm going to bump the Hexmark up to the top of B. Okay, next we're on to the Tomb Blades. Tomb Blades have been pretty good all edition. It's our fast shooty option. They got much better towards the end because of their points reduction. They were cheap. I think it was 54 points for a min unit without any bells and whistles. Pretty cheap. With objective secure, they were pretty useful. They were very comparable to Canoptek Scarabs, although the problem I found is when you're taking an objective, you got to expect a melee unit to come after you. And Tomb Blades don't stand up against melee units. They're not a melee unit, they can't really fight back. Whereas Scarabs, okay, they also aren't great at fighting, but they had some punch, and they had 4 wounds apiece. So, even though they're not toughness 5, I suppose. So it was quite difficult to separate them, but Scarabs for me just have a lot more uses. Tomb Blades, they can fire, in the Mithric Dynasty in particular. They're fantastic, and I know a lot of people did use them. I didn't use them as much as I could have, because Scarabs kind of took my slots all the time, but they're definitely S tier. They're definitely S tier, and I'm going to stick them. But I could argue a point for putting them behind the Spyders just for my personal playstyle, but I know that they are there, so that's where they go. Right, this one, I've got to get these in the right order because I always mix these up. One is fast attack, which is the Sentinel, which I believe is that one. So that means this one. Right, so this is the Tomb Sentinel. I've got it the wrong way around. Tomb Sentinel. This is the one with the big Exile Cannon. It's a fast attack option. It's got strength 10, minus 4 AP, 3 damage. It has got blast, which is unfortunate, but it is trying to get into melee anyway. And it can also deny a power because of a Gloom Prism. Now these were pretty useful in the Cult of the Cryptek Army of Renown, because they were basically selectable. They kind of acted like our heavy support option because of the big gun, because you couldn't take any of the heavy stuff. You couldn't take Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, Doomsday Arks, la la la. So these kind of acted like that, so that's why I give them a little bit more credit, but they still kind of stink. So I'm going to go, let's move on and maybe I'll move it. So next we got the Tomb Sentinel, virtually the same thing except it's a little bit better in melee. Have I said Sentinel or Stalker? Have I said Sentinel or Stalker? I can't remember. This is the Stalker we're going to do now. I always get these, even in the thumbnail I got these mixed up. I got them the wrong way around. This is the Stalker. This is the elite option. This is the one with the Gauss Slicers and the Tombstalker Claws. Rapid Fire 2 with Strength 5, and then it's got the Claws. I just don't see any reason to take it. Okay, it's got 6 attacks, but why would you take this over like Spyders, for example? This one doesn't deserve to be near the other one. Acrinthrites, no. God, I'm going to go there. Imotekh? I'm going to go there. That's pretty bad. Oh my god, Reanimator. No, can't go that far, right? Okay, next we've got Traz in the Infinite. I don't like him. Now, in the Crusade game, he's probably much better because there's some abilities and some rules that work differently with the Ancient Collector's ability. But in the standard 40k game, doesn't do much. Okay, he's an Overlord, he's got all the My Will Be Done and all that jazz. You can't select relics again. Wall of Trait is selected for you. The weapon kind of stinks. He's a dynastic agent, and his ability, was it called Surrogate Host, where he takes over the form of another character on the game. That could be, say, a Hexmark Destroyer or a Necron Lord. I mean, you're not taking a Necron Lord, are you? So it's going to be like a Hexmark Destroyer, not a Hexmark, yeah, Hexmark Destroyer. You could kill off your Hexmark and transfer Traz in the Infinite to where the Hexmark was. I'd rather have the Hexmark, to be honest with you. I just don't think that ability is worth anything. I'm going to go D again. It's got to be above Nemesor Zahndrekh, because at least this guy can go in any dynasty, right? He's a dynastic agent. He's going above this crappy flyer. Orikan, between these 3 models right here, the Psychomancer, Trazin and Orikan, in the game, they stink. Now, of course, in the actual books, these guys are brilliant, but we're not talking about books. Right, there's not that many left now, guys. Right, the Silent King. Let's try and speed this up. I'm slowing it down too much. Speed it up. The Silent King. S tier, but whereabouts? I mean, on my notes, for some reason, I've got A. I don't know why I've got A. I think at the start of the edition, he wasn't as... I played him a few times at the start, I mean, and he didn't do a lot. He didn't do a lot. I thought he was going to be an absolute beatstick, and he wasn't. But then you sort of learned how to use him and learn how that he's more of a buffing character than an actual beatstick, although he can do that as well. He is S tier. He's better than them. He's better than them. He's probably better than that. I'm going to stick him up there somewhere. I'm going to stick him up in... This one's tricky because from a lot of the edition, he was the auto-include, especially with the, bringing back the Triarch. Then he got nerfed, he lost the core keyword. I mean, he gained the core keyword, then he lost the core keyword, but that was the right decision. He should never have had core. But for a moment in time, he had core, which was mad. He was buffing himself. But even without those buffs, without the core keyword, he's still very good. So I'm going to stick him there. Some of you guys might push him to the front more. For me, I don't choose him as often as a Chronomancer or a Technomancer or anything in between. Right, Vanguard Oberon. Stick him in D with Nemesor. You're not going to take him on his own without the Nemesor. If you're taking the Nemesor, you've already lost anyway. So I'm going to stick him right down there with the Gauss Pylons and the Sentry Pylon. Right, Tesseract Bolts. Oh, this one's tricky. It got loads of points reductions. It's a big giant Catan with a load of wounds. Catan powers that are much more effective because it's a Volt. It's going to attract a lot of attention. It's a big, bulky, thick model, so it's quite difficult to move it around the battlefield. But it's going up. It's sort of... I don't want to say Nightbringer area because it's below that for me. I'm going to go B+. Sort of the top end of B. Oh, should I knock it down a bit? No, I'm lying to myself here. I use the Hexmark a lot more. Middle of B, I think is fair for me from where I play. Some of you guys love it. Void Dragon, another Catan again. We've spoken about quite a number of Catans now. Void Dragon, it's got to be up there top of B. I still prefer the Nightbringer, but I understand that there's a lot of power coming from the Void Dragon, especially against vehicles. He's also got a shooting attack as well as, being good in combat, as well as the movement phase with the Catan power. So he's got 3 phases where he's doing damage. I'm going to stick him there. I'm going to go with that. I don't use him as often as a Nightbringer, so I can't I can't say he's my go-to, but yeah, when I have used him, he's done pretty well. Right, we've got 4 left here now, and all 4 of these are pretty good. What's that one? That's Lich Guard, right. Necron Warriors, we've got 2 entries for the Necron Warriors. We've got the Gauss Flayers and the Gauss Reapers. Early edition, it was all about the Gauss Reapers, wasn't it? Well, it was all about Warriors to begin. Gauss Reapers with a 1, strength 5, was pretty good. Okay, it's only 12-inch range. The Flayers are more used for the Celtic Dynasty, which is where I started the edition with. But as soon as Warriors became a bit useless at the start, they went in the bin for Immortals. But Gauss Reapers are still definitely the better option. I can't put them in S, even though they probably deserve an S. For most of the edition, they were not the go-to for me. Immortals were, so they've got to go down a peg. I'm going to go there, after an Overlord. The Gauss Flayers, I did use Gauss Flayers in lists over Gauss Reapers, but it was only when I did the ancient dynasties, custom dynasties for rapid fire weapons. Very rarely did I do that though. So I've put them above the Immortals here. Hold on, I've done this wrong. 2 secs, hold on. That doesn't make any sense. I'm thinking of the wrong list. It should be in B. They're in B. I'm going to put them with, I know this might be a bit of a cop-out, but I'm going to put them with the Immortals because they kind of shared the edition. Immortals had a lot of it. The Warriors had the start and the end of it. The Tesla, oh, maybe we can order the Tesla. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Maybe that's controversial. I don't think it is, but the Gauss Reapers are better than the Tesla Carbines. Let's move on. 2 left. Lich Guard. Lich Guard. We've only got 1 entry with the Lich Guard, even though there's 2 types. You've got the Swords and Shields or the War Scythe option. I personally prefer the Swords and Shields. I want them being resilient. That's how we score points in 9th edition for Necrons. Hopefully that does change for 10th. I want to see us a little bit more killy rather than trying to aim for points. But as for Lich Guard, they've got BA. I was using them quite often. It's just a matter of where. I think there. Maybe Overlord. There. Top of A. Top of A. They're pretty good. Arguably better than Spyders, but I love Spyders. They're just really good. So I'm going to stick them in A. Top of A. And then we come on to the Canoptek Wraiths, which are our final entry of this video and this tier list today. Canoptek Wraiths, they're quick. They can take either the Whip Coils or the Claws, the Vicious Claws. The Vicious Claws I think was strength 6, -2 damage. Whip Coils were a bit less than that with only 1 damage. You got the flexibility there, but again, you got to select them pre-game. A little bit like the Praetorians with the issue there. You got to select them without knowing what your opponent's got. So the Vicious Claws were probably the better option just for going in blind. Now with the Cryptek Army of Renown, they were pretty useful. They got a few bonuses in terms of stratagems. They obviously got the Army of Renown bonus of a +1 to the hit roll. On top of that, not a +1 to the, well, +1 attack, sorry. On top of that, so that made them even better, I suppose. Now I don't think that Army of Renown was ultra competitive, but it was something extra for Necrons. I'm going to go the top of A, and I'll explain why. I know some of you were looking at S. For me, they are fantastic, and the reason is they can move through models, they can move through terrain, they can charge through it as well, so they don't have to take the movement to charge up over a building. They got the Invuln Save, which is brilliant. There's not many units that have got the Invuln Save that are Infantry, Swarm or Beasts, apart from the Lich Guard, I suppose, with the Swords and Shields. The fact is they didn't do a lot of damage against most factions. Like if you go against Space Marines, that was perfect, -2 and 2 damage. You wounded them on a 3+ as well. That was enough for them. But if you're going up against other factions, then that wasn't the case. So it was very situational, but they could hold their own. That's the one good thing. You don't need to have a unit to buff them. You don't need a character to buff them. You can take the control node with the Technomancer. You can take a command barge with a Marvel with Done ability. So you can buff them. Or even the Silent King, in fact. That was a good unit to flank with the Silent King. But I just didn't think the damage outlay was enough, but they made up for it in resiliency. That's why they're still so high up, and arguably they should be with Tomb Blades, shouldn't they? They're not as cheap though. You know what? I'm going to do it. They're going into S tier, but they're going at the back of S tier. Right, so I don't think there's going to be any changes. I think I'm happy with that. So yeah, that is my end result of the Necron units for the entirety of 9th edition. So remember, this isn't just Arks of Omen. This goes right back to the beginning throughout the whole edition. This is how I personally play them. This is my personal playstyle, my personal choices. If yours is different, put them down in the comments below. Also, if I've missed any units, there is a potential of me missing a unit or two. Let me know down in the comments below which ones I've missed, and I'll put one of the comments in a pin just to give you my tier for that specific unit. So guys, that is it from me today. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.